and cleared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me solid through and through, danced a jig over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still have me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
What's up, everybody? We are back. Finally, the Disciples of Ed podcast, once again bringing you Flyers hockey coverage. It's been a long time, but the playoffs are finally here. Technically, they started just over a week ago, but the real playoffs, finally the traditional first round underway now. Actually, we've got Columbus and Tampa Bay in their third overtime right now. We've got Dallas and Calgary also going on. Anyway, I'm your host, Rob, joined tonight by Steve. How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
I am doing quite well now that playoff hockey is back, finally. Something to actually do during this time of otherwise not having anything to do.
Right.
And we are also joined by Joe Borick, who has been an occasional guest on the show. Joe, how you doing?
Doing very well. I think I told you this, Rob, before we opened a podcast for Chasing the Pennant. Once everything comes back, I'm going to be in a much better mood when I'm not watching the Phillies, that is, in their bullpen. But the hockey's back. I'm watching all day playoffs, and I just sit home writing all day usually for different websites and stuff, so I'm usually get to watch most of the game. Not watch them amply because I have to write stuff, but you have to at least pay attention to the goals. So it's been very fun, and I just love this sport so much, and watching this March Madness style. It's different, but it made it fun, so I'm okay with it for this one season for sure.
There you go. Joe Borick, a very important person, does a lot of sports talk and sports writing. And Joe, do you have the split screen going on right now? What between, I guess maybe it's both hockey games or maybe a hockey game and a baseball game?
I really should be watching the baseball game because I'm supposed to be on a podcast for that later, but there's a overtime hockey game on and a 3-2 hockey game on, so yeah, about that.
It's a solid excuse, all right?
Yeah.
Solid excuse. It's just
man.
like, it's as if we were actually in, April. I always pick the playoff hockey over baseball.
All right, so we apologize in advance if you hear somewhat of a reaction if the game winner is scored here in the final 11:45 of this third overtime, or even if they go to a fourth overtime. This game is taking forever. It's already the longest game in Blue Jackets history. So anyway, let's cut to the chase here. The traditional first round of the NHL playoffs is upon us. Out in the Western Conference, we got the four matchups being the Vegas Golden Knights taking on the Chicago Blackhawks, who upset the Edmonton Oilers in the qualifying round. We've got the Colorado Avalanche taking on the Arizona Coyotes, who upset the Predators in the qualifying round. We've got the Dallas Stars taking on the Calgary Flames. As we said, that game is currently a 3-2 Calgary lead, game one right there. And we've got the St. Louis Blues taking on the Vancouver Canucks. And here in the Eastern Conference, we've got the Boston Bruins taking on the Carolina Hurricanes. We've got the Washington Capitals and the New York Islanders. We've got a rematch from last year, the Tampa Bay Lightning looking to get revenge on the Columbus Blue Jackets. It's a game we're currently watching right now in the third overtime. And we've got our Philadelphia Flyers, the top seed for the first time in 20 years, taking on the Montreal Canadiens, fresh off a big upset in the qualifying round over the Pittsburgh Penguins. And guys, we'll start with the Western Conference because we'll work our way over to the Flyers series, which will be the last one that we talk about. We'll start with that Golden Knights versus Blackhawks series. As I said, the Blackhawks with somewhat of an upset over the Edmonton Oilers, who were kind of the host team in the Western Conference, being that the games are played in Edmonton, the hub city there. The Blackhawks looking very impressive. The Golden Knights looking impressive in their seeding games, earning that number one spot in the Western Conference. And Steve, we'll start with you. Who do you have winning this series, and what are maybe one or two things to look out for?
It's definitely Vegas, but Chicago could surprise. I I don't think it's going to be an easy, like totally easy series for Vegas, but I mean Chicago does have that playoff experience with Patrick Kane, Jonathan Toews, Duncan Keith, Corey Crawford even. But Vegas, they got Robin Lehner. It's his revenge series against Chicago. Thanks for the chance. Now you traded me, so thanks again. I'm going to shut you guys down.
Sweet revenge seems like it's going to be a theme of the playoffs. You got the Tampa looking for revenge here. You got Robin Lehner looking for revenge. It's going to be and you've also got the Islanders looking to get revenge on the Capitals out there. They've been knocked out of the playoffs a few times. And the Hurricanes going up against the Bruins. That was a series that happened last year as well. But yeah, Robin Lehner could be an X factor in that series. He's played well since he came over to the Vegas Golden Knights. It'll be interesting to see if he can keep that up in this series. Joe, what about you? How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, it's going to be Vegas because even if Robin Lehner were to struggle a little bit, you don't have a bad fallback option. I mean, your fallback option is Marc-Andre Fleury, who's stepped up at times in the playoffs, so maybe he can get hot again. And so, I mean, you definitely have two good fallback options there. They probably have, if not the best tandem, a top three tandem in the playoffs of goaltenders. So Vegas also plays deeper in lines than Chicago. The Chicago's kind of top two heavy. Vegas can kind of go three deep at least, when they're going strong. So that's helpful. So, I mean, I think Vegas is going to win this series. I can't remember what I took in the bracketing game total. I think it was 5 or 6 games, but they're definitely going to win this series.
Yeah, I think Vegas wins as well. I actually had this one going 6 games because I think that, Steve, as you mentioned, those guys on Chicago with the playoff experience, Kane and Taves and Duncan Keith and all of them, they'll pull out a couple games. I just think Vegas has too much depth. Bork, as you mentioned, the goaltending, definitely an advantage for the Golden Knights there. And I love the way that Vegas plays hockey. I love their pace. They certainly have so much more depth, as I just mentioned, which is something that Chicago's previous opponent, Edmonton, really lacked. Edmonton kind of a team that does as well as their 2 stars do, and they don't have much depth beyond that. Vegas is a different animal. Vegas can beat you with the first line. They can beat you with the second line. They can beat you with the third or fourth lines. They can beat you with goaltending. So many different ways in which they can win a hockey game. So I'm going to agree with you guys. I'm going with the Golden Knights, and I'm taking them in 6 games in this series. So moving on, and we'll start with you for this series. The Colorado Avalanche taking on the Arizona Coyotes. Arizona coming off an upset of Nashville in the qualifying round. Who do you have winning this series?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to piss off my friend with this one so bad, but hopefully Joe doesn't listen to this. But I actually have Darcy Kemper continuing to carry Arizona, and that'll be their final draw once they get in that round. But I have them continuing to get past Colorado because Colorado is an impressive team. I think it'll go 7 games, but Darcy's a Vezina winning goaltender. Colorado, unfortunately, doesn't have one of those. They have Grubauer, who had a very good playoffs last year but didn't win. And then they have Francois, who played very good coming over from overseas of the KHL and Czech League prior. So they don't have the experience of Ranta and Kemper. So I think that'll help them. And Arizona's a funny team. They suck for the first 10 minutes, and Darcy Kemper basically says, "Don't worry, boys, I got you." Then they remember how to play hockey. So, I mean, that's not going to work as well against Colorado, but the thing is they have Darcy Kemper, and I just believe in the guy, so that's why I'm rolling with Arizona. Now, they're not going to get beyond Vegas, though, but I'm rolling with them for Colorado.
Darcy Kemper love there. That's a new one. I haven't heard that one yet. Steve, what about you? How do you feel about this series?
I absolutely agree with you, Borg, about the Darcy Kemper love. I wouldn't say he's quite Vezina quality quite yet. He's got to prove himself a little bit more, but he is pretty outstanding goalie. He's really coming to his own, and he is the reason why Arizona is as good as they are. I believe he went down early in the year, and Arizona really just dropped off. But he's definitely a number 1 goalie in these times now, and he's the main reason why they have made it to where they are. But I still think Colorado wins this, but I think it goes to like 6 or 7. I think Colorado's just too, top heavy. They have some pretty good depth. Their defense, Cale Makar, is just wrecking it right now. And Grubauer is definitely, he's solid. And even Francois, as Bork said, he he's serviceable. He's had some great games. I think he had an outstanding first 5 games in his career was against us. It just seems about right. I could be wrong, but it goes with the Flyers being very mediocre against goalies making their debut. But I think Colorado would just have too much kind of star power for Arizona. But I do think Arizona really makes this a series. I think it's going to be a great series to watch.
For sure.
Yeah, Steve, I'm going to agree with you that Colorado wins the series. I'm actually going to say that they win it in 5 games. I think they make it a little bit easier. I think that Darcy Kemper does enough to win a game for Arizona and also keep them in a number of other games. But I just think that Nathan McKinnon and guys like Landeskog and the top scoring line for Colorado, they're just too talented. Arizona, yes, they have Taylor Hall, but I don't see them being able to keep up in terms of the goal scoring. As I said, Kemper will do all that he can to keep them in the games. I think that's the X factor right there. I think Nathan McKinnon's going to have himself a big series, and it'll be a relatively quick series. I'm going to go with the Colorado Avalanche in 5 games.
Yeah, I think this series will show Kemper for what he is, and that's a potential Vezina candidate, like Bork was saying.
Yeah, if he didn't get injured, he probably would have honestly been a Vezina candidate this year, with the guys. So,
he's always been one of those guys who's kind of flown under the radar because he's never played for a big market team. He played where was it, up in Minnesota?
Minnesota, yeah.
They got a rabid fan base, but
yeah, it's a great hockey market, but it's not a national hockey market. It's not like playing in Chicago or New York or Boston or Philadelphia. So he
was kind of dumped off during the Backstrom Harding years. I think that's when he started coming up. So I think he's 29 now.
I want to say that is correct. Yeah, late 20s, 29 sounds about right. So yeah, and now he's playing with Arizona, which is even a smaller market team. So because of that, nobody really talks much about him, but he is a really good goaltender, and this, as you guys alluded to, is his chance to kind of show that off and get his name out there a little bit.
Yeah, if he didn't do so in the first round already for how they beat them, but
it's true.
Yeah. All right, so moving on to another series that is currently underway, the Dallas Stars taking on the Calgary Flames. Calgary currently with a 3-2 lead in I believe the second period of Game 1 out there, and they're coming off a nice series win, albeit over a shorthanded Winnipeg Jets team, but they looked pretty solid in doing so. And Dallas, they've got a nice defense. They've got good goaltending. Offense, a huge question mark for them. Steve, how do you have this series going?
It's really a toss-up to me. I think Calgary, their goaltending seems like a weak point, but David Riddick, he played really good. I hope I said his name right. I could have gotten his first name wrong. I didn't really do much research, I'll be honest. But Cam Talbot starting, and he played very well in the qualifying. Against Winnipeg. But I mean, Calgary, they have Sean Monahan, they got Johnny Gaudreau, but they did kind of struggle throughout this year, especially going through the whole Jeff Ward taking over. Their defense, they have solid players. They should be better than what they are. Dallas, love Heiskanen and I love Klingberg. They got Ben Bishop and Anton Kudaban, who I think is right there with Darcy Kemper. If these guys have been backups, they get a chance, they will show that they are worthy of starting. And Kudaban actually started today's game, so that was interesting given Ben Bishop's pedigree.
I think he was injured. I think that's why. They said he was somewhere. But
they said he was fit to play. He was dressed.
They did dress him fit to. Okay.
Yeah. It's a matter of if Joe Pavelski can just produce like he always has, then the Stars could go all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals and lose. But they got Jamie Benn, they got Tyler Seguin, they got Denis Gurianov. If they give him more playing time, more of an opportunity, then I think they're extremely dangerous. I don't even know if I can pick a winner in this. It could go any way. Dallas could continue their mediocre play since about like a week or so before this pandemic really hit and the season got basically canceled, and then they went to this, and then they didn't do too well in the round robin. So it's really a toss up for me. I'm just gonna throw up a prayer and say Dallas figures it out and wins it. I don't even know how many games it'll be.
All right. Joe, what about you? How do you feel about this one?
I picked Dallas, but I would say this is probably the series that I think most national fans might care about the least. Because it's not the most exciting team to watch. Dallas is one of the more frustrating teams to watch in hockey because on paper they have a team you go, oh yeah, their goal numbers should be a lot higher than they are. Then you watch them and you're just like, yeah, what the hell are you doing? And why are you playing that system of hockey? Like I understand defense wins first, but they play so defensive, they never get offensive that much until like right in the end of the game when they're like, oh crap, there's 5 minutes left. And then, but like I'm hoping that translates over, and hopefully since Bowness didn't have a lot of time and he's still getting used to the team, it'll translate. They look a little bit better in today's game, but although they do have a lucky goal that went through Cam Talbot's wickets by Jamie, and that might have got deflected, but Ben shot it. So I think Dallas is going to win, like Steve said, but it's a tough series to pick. I picked Dallas just because on paper I love their team, and I hope eventually they finally play to what they're supposed to be on paper and not like a nuisance to watch with NHL TV all season. So,
so this series, I think, is one of the most evenly matched in the first round. I think that if Dallas is going to win, they kind of need a little bit of a rebirth from Jamie Benn, getting back to the player he was a few years ago. Same thing with Tyler Seguin.
Yeah.
Those two guys, they need them to play better than they've been playing this season and just get out there and do what they've done in the past. And I'm not so confident that that's going to happen. I'm more confident that Johnny Gaudreau will get back to what he used to be and Sean Monahan will get back to what he used to be. I see the Calgary Flames taking this series. I think it goes 7. I think it's going to be back and forth. It might be one of those series, where teams alternate wins in every game. I think we're going to have a few overtime games. This low key, if you don't mind, kind of the slow-paced hockey that Dallas plays, might be one of the most entertaining series out there. Just because of how closely matched these two teams are, and the fact that I think we're going to get a lot of close, low-scoring games. But with that said, I'll reiterate, I'm going with Calgary in 7.
I definitely agree with you, Rob. I think it could go 7. This game could also go 4. I just don't know how to like really take a guess at it, but I think every game is going to be close, no matter how many. It's 4, 5, 6, or 7. Yeah. But it's also two interesting points about this series, which makes me intrigued about it, is fuck Corey Perry and fuck Milan Lucic. And fuck Matthew Tkachuk. But also, I think they're both teams with interim head coaches, so a lot for the future on the line for both teams as well.
Yeah, definitely there. And you mentioned Matthew Tkachuk. I almost forgot about the guy. How could I forget about Matthew Tkachuk? I think that if he stays healthy and he stays out of the penalty box, that guy could be an X factor in this series.
He already had a fight.
Already today, yeah. Right off the bat, it was him and Corey Perry. Yep.
This is great.
Yeah, the two guys Sean brought up. But I was going to say, I guess I'll give it 6 for Dallas because I don't think I gave a game total. But this series is also intriguing because just like the Flyers have somebody like Umberger who stepped up in the playoffs that was not as good as his draft pick otherwise, they have Sam Bennett. And for some reason, Sam Bennett remembers what hockey is in the postseason. But in the regular season, does not remember what he's supposed to be doing and does not play to the draft pick he is. So if that continues, then that can help Calgary too. But I just think Dallas, Jamie Benn, sometimes in like baseball, it takes that one play to get you going. Maybe it'll take that one through the wickets of Talbot to get him going a little bit. So.
All right, so moving on to the final series in the Western Conference, we've got the St. Louis Blues, the defending Stanley Cup champion for the first time in their history, taking on a team that's never won the Stanley Cup, the Vancouver Canucks. And that is the 4-5 matchup in the Western Conference. The Blues, a team that really stumbled in the seeding games, and Vancouver, a team that took care of business against Minnesota. Joe, we'll start with you. Who do you have winning that series?
Yeah, this series is going to be really interesting for one guy in particular, and that's going to be Vancouver's Jacob Markstrom because he came into having a great qualifying round and is coming into a contract year. So obviously he's going to want to continue owning it. But I think he'll have a good series. But I think in him having a good series, St. Louis will still be too much for Vancouver. They'll figure it out and bounce back. I think they were a team that for some reason just needed. They have older, more veteran, one of the oldest team, if not the oldest team in the playoffs. So have to get everything going a little bit more, where they're not like Boston, where guys showed up late and they're not really in sync. They're more a team that's just not in sync because I feel they need to get everything going, not because guys are not trained and not in as much hockey shape. So I took St. Louis in, I think I said 6 games, but I'll take them in 6 games. That's going to be a hard-fought series. Markstrom's probably going to keep killing it. But Bennington also is, of course, an impressive goaltender that's also young in terms of experience. So that's going to be a fun series to watch. But I'll give it to the former Flyer, Greg Berube's team.
Love that goaltending matchup, by the way. Steve, how do you feel about this one?
I'm intrigued by how Vancouver will do, but I do think the Blues just win this one. I think the Canucks get 1, maybe 2 wins in this, if they're very lucky, if Markstrom steals a game, or if Elias Peterson and Quinn Hughes really take over a game. Vancouver is an intriguing team because they have Elias, they have Quinn Hughes, really coming into their own, and then they have Markstrom. If they are able to keep him and he continues his strong play, then you basically have your number 1 seed, number 1 D, and your number 1 goalie. So that's a good recipe for a team building coming out of rebuild, retool, where the fuck they were going through. It was very confusing. But I just think St. Louis, I think the talent disparity, like all throughout the lineups, is just too much, and I think St. Louis just comes away with this.
Yeah, see, I think that Vancouver's young talent is going to be successful in this series. I think that Elias Pettersson's going to have a nice series. I think Bo Horvat's going to have a nice series. I think that Markstrom is going to be impressive at points in this series as well. But I just think that the core of the Blues that helped them win that Stanley Cup is going to show through. And you're getting a team that just won it all going against a team where they don't really have a whole lot of playoff experience. So Vancouver, it's been a few years since they've been in the playoffs. I'm not sure exactly how many guys on their roster who have playoff experience, but that cup-winning experience of St. Louis from last season, I think it's going to show through. Vancouver will pull out a couple games. I see this one going 6, but I see the Blues taking it in the end.
I was going to say sometimes it's also just about snapping back to reality and stuff when you're like in the actual groove of the playoffs. I feel like St. Louis's game, they're like an adrenaline run team too. They might do better in that instance. They're really oriented off of kind of like how Greg Berube is. They run off of the adrenaline, and I think when it's actually a series, that's going to behoove them a lot more than a round robin.
Yeah, I got to give kudos to Craig Berube. He figured out how to coach, but he also has much more talent all around than what he had with the Flyers at the time. But he's also giving younger guys a chance, so
he figured it
see
out.
him actually succeed. Yeah,
a few years
sometimes
too late.
Coaches need that.
Figured it out a few years too late, but oh well, we've got AV now. We're good.
Yep.
Yeah, hindsight's 20/20. I don't know if Hackstall will be so lucky, but at least Greg Berube figured it out.
Hackstall's a fucking idiot. He's not going to figure it out.
Did you see Hackstall when Toronto was attempting the comeback? I have to segue to this. Toronto called a timeout, trying to get back from it. It was 2-0 at the time. They're drawing up the play, and off to this the side, like near the end of the bench, is Dave Hackstall. He's just looking up at the jumbotron, and it was just,
that sounds about right. Expressionless too.
It was so fucking funny. It was so fucking funny. I have to bring it up every time I'm talking about that. Dave Hackstall's brought up. I have to bring that up.
Oh man, yeah. Fond memories of Dave Hackstall here in Philadelphia. Yeah, not really. Anyway, moving on to the Eastern Conference now. We'll start off with the 4-5 matchup in the East. We got the defending Eastern Conference champion, the Boston Bruins, in a rematch of last year's Eastern Conference Finals going against the Carolina Hurricanes. Boston, a team that won the President's Trophy in the regular season, the abbreviated regular season. They looked really impressive, and then they looked like complete shit in the seeding games, just didn't even bother to show up at all. Carolina, a team that was kind of up and down throughout the regular season and, kicked it into gear and looked pretty impressive against the New York Rangers in the qualifying round. And Joe, we'll start off with you this time. How do you feel about this series?
Yeah, I think the Hurricanes are just going to keep – I shouldn't have betted against Rob Brindamore to begin with after Dougie Hamilton went out, but I did, and I regretted that decision now. But I'm not doing that again. He's a young version of Tortorella. He just knows how to put people in the lineup, and he's just a lesser experienced version of him. He knows how to get people in there. NAV just knows how to mix his lineup up and figure it out no matter who he's playing. So, and also Boston, like I said, to unfortunate circumstances, had guys come in late. It's not like Cassidy can't really do much about that. They're just not really in a groove because nobody has been fully practicing with each other for as long as other teams. Carolina was a team that really had little issues to none. So they've been cruising with gas. Brindamore lets them have all that motivation and all that with the celebrations and everyone be themselves. And I think his system there, as well as the mentality and personality he gives off, just works really well. And they're just going to keep carrying that momentum into the next round. And they're going to beat Boston probably in 5 or 6 games, because I don't think Boston's going to look that good this postseason. I think they're going to be a team we all go, wow, they really suck from doing good in the regular season.
All right, so you got Carolina in 6. Steve, how you going with this one?
Probably Carolina in 6 or 7. I think Carolina is it's weird to say that they seem to be a very underrated team because they always just do well, especially after their playoff surge last season. How well they did, and then this year they're just a team they're just a frightening team. Like, you don't want to be matched up against them. I think we had a pretty good record against them this year, but it's still a team that if I'm playing them in a best of 7, I'm still kind of worried. But and that's like Bork was saying, Brindamore, he's really got this team playing like how he wants them to be. How he did. He's got Jordan Stahl for the defensive moments. He got Sebastian Aho, for the offense. And then they got Svechnikov, just absolutely killing it. Dougie Hamilton coming back is a huge boost. Brady Skjei, I always pronounce his name wrong, usually on purpose. That deadline acquisition I wasn't sure about, but it's working out. He's done well. Their defense seems kind of stacked. They got Sami Vatanen. Their main weakness seems like it's Peter Mrazek and James Reimer, but I really like Reimer, and I like Mrazek, so I think it'll ultimately come down to their goaltending, and I think that they could pull it off. And I think Brindamore has confidence in both guys to say, hey, if you're not doing it quite well, I'm going to go switch to the other guy, and they'll just keep rolling.
Well, I'm happy I met another guy that likes Mrazek and Reimer, so there we go. Cool.
The only article I wrote for the Always Next Year podcast, blog, was how I wanted us to trade for Mrazek, and we did. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. But I really like him, and I've always liked Reimer ever since his days in Toronto. He won a half playoff series in Toronto, too, before Toronto. That's hilarious, and I love it. But those are 2 goalies I trust, not really to, start the majority of games in a season, I would say. But, as a tandem, it's a tandem I could get behind.
Yeah, I also forgot to mention Dougie Hamilton might be back, because I remember they said soon. Whatever the hell soon means. They said he'll be back soon. So.
I think they did say that he was going to play tonight. Yeah. I could be wrong, but I'm 90% certain that he's going to play tonight whenever this game happens.
That's a huge game changer. Yeah, because he's in there now, the quarterback of their power play when you didn't have him until now, and you worked it well. Another guy that you have to call out when you talk in positive is Slavin. Slavin's one of the most underrated defensemen in the league.
Oh, yeah, he definitely should have gotten more. If you didn't get any Norris fish, he's gotten some. He's really just broken out. He's like the guy that won't be talked about enough, but he just plays the perfect game, basically.
Exactly.
But also Boston, they've really underperformed here, but they do end up surprising. I never thought that they would be as good as they are, as consistently, since 3 years ago. They have players on the teams. I'm like, who the fuck is this? But then they produce in the playoffs. So I can't really count them out, but I just think Carolina will just keep this storm rolling as I continue my puns with them.
Yeah, this is going to be another interesting series. The way I see it, there's 3 coaches in the playoffs who can always get their team up to just bust their ass, go 110% for them. Alain Vigneault is one of them. John Tortorella is another, and the third one is Rob Brindamore down in Carolina. So you can guarantee that team is going to be giving every ounce of effort that they have to offer. Their compete level is going to be through the roof, and I see them probably taking the opening game, but at some point, I see that top-end talent of Boston, David Pasternak, Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, all those guys, Torrey Krug, eventually they're going to get going. And whether it's game 2, whether it's game 3, I don't know if that would be too late or not, but I see those guys eventually waking up from their slumber, and maybe the series goes 6 or 7 games, but I see the Boston Bruins pulling it out. Once again, Brendan Moore, great head coach, will always get his team to bust their ass for him. That top-end talent for Boston, if they get going, they're pretty scary, and I see them winning this series. And Tuukka Rask, he has the ability, when he wants to basically stand on his head and win a hockey game all by himself if he needs to. We saw it in that last game, that last regular season game before the coronavirus hit in Philadelphia, where the Flyers peppered him with, I think, damn near 40 shots in that game, and he got a shutout. So, yeah, it's going to be a fun series to watch. There is going to be that revenge factor that we mentioned before for Carolina, but I think that talent that Boston has up top, and not to mention they still have a couple guys left over from that 2011 team that won the Stanley Cup. They still got Bergeron, they still got Marchand, they still got Tuukka Rask, they still got Zdeno Chara as well. So they've got that veteran leadership that knows how to win there. Winning that Stanley Cup and also being back a couple times since then, I think that pays dividends in the playoffs, and I think that's what will be the X factor for the Bruins in winning this series. Once again, Bruins, I'll say in 7 games over the Carolina Hurricanes. So moving on to another series that we've seen a few times in recent years, the Washington Capitals taking on the New York Islanders. Capitals, a team that a lot of people thought were going to be the top team in the East, and had a nice regular season, kind of stumbled a little bit down the stretch. And the Islanders, who got off to a red-hot start in the regular season and honestly did not play well at all over the last maybe month and a half or so, but they snuck into the playoffs. They got it together against the Florida Panthers in the qualifying round. That is our 3-6 matchup. Steve, we'll start with you. Who do you got in this one?
I have the Capitals, but I think it's going to be close. And that's purely because of the Barry Trotz factor and Matt Barzal. Also, Anthony Beauvillier. Hard to say. I've had some whiskey.
Beauvillier.
Yeah, that's it. He's been killing it. He was killing in the qualifying rounds against the Panthers. I think it's going to be a tough, fought-out series. I think it goes 6 or 7 unless something drastically changes, like in the first couple games. But I really just do think that Washington will be able to hold off just enough. But the Islanders they're a very solid team. I mean, they don't scare me if we're playing them, but they are a solid team, and Barzal can take over a game, and everybody out they don't really have as much talented depth that you would think, but they do enough. And Washington, they got Oshie, they got Eller, they got Kovalchuk now with Ovechkin and Backstrom, Kuznetsov. It really depends on the health of John Carlson, I guess. But I do see Washington coming through with this.
All right, Joe, how do you feel about this one?
I had it. I think it's going to be a really close series. I think Washington, both of the teams actually did not look as good as they did throughout closing out the season before the stoppage. And then Washington continued to struggle a little bit, where the Islanders looked better. Varlamov looked fairly solid. Beauvillier obviously looked amazing, which is their top-notch guys didn't even get going yet fully for the Islanders because of how good Beauvillier looked. So I feel like they actually are going to win this series, and I'm happy Steve brought up the matchup that could be against us because that's the matchup my bracket would have. So, and so I have them beating the Capitals, and I think it will be I think that series is going to go 7 games without a doubt. And because Barry Trotz knows that team also, he's been there recently, knows a lot of the players. They have some new players, but the core is the same basically in DC. I think he's going to be able to outcoach Reardon. I don't think he's that great of a coach, and not Barry Trotz, Reardon. And I think the Capitals are a little bit overrated because of that. I think he screws them over sometimes.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with that. I think the Islanders actually take the series because of the coaching matchup. I love Barry Trotz as a coach. I didn't mention him as one of the guys who always gets that high compete level out of his team. And by the way, we just had one game go to final. Calgary taking game 1
before the
over
freaking
Dallas.
first game.
Spoilers.
Yeah.
I had 9 seconds left on my TV. I'm on a delay because I'm watching the NBC
Oh,
Sports.
man. Anyway, getting back to what I was talking about before, Barry Trotz doesn't always get that compete level that some of the other coaches do, but his system is one that always does well in the playoffs. And on the other side, I think Todd Reardon is the worst head coach in all the playoffs. I think that Washington, with the talent that they have, should have been doing so much more than they did. I think they should have been maybe not far and away the best team in the NHL, but definitely head and shoulders above other teams. I think that Todd Reardon, I don't like him in big situations. I don't like some of the decisions he makes, and I don't think that he gets that compete level that I've been talking about out of his players all the time. So I think that's going to be a big X factor, and for that reason alone, I see the New York Islanders taking the upset in this series. It's probably going to go 7, maybe 6, but I see the Islanders taking that series. Anyway, moving on to the one that is currently in progress right now, heading to a 4th overtime in Game 1, currently approaching Flyers-Pens 2000 territory. That is the Tampa Bay Lightning looking to get their revenge on the Columbus Blue Jackets, who swept them in the opening round of the playoffs last year. Steve, how do you feel this one is going?
Well, considering we're about to go into the 4th overtime, I think this is a pretty huge deciding game for a Game 1. Tampa Bay has played clearly a shit ton better than last year against Columbus, but I think Columbus is just a matchup nightmare for them. But if Tampa is able to pull out this game, then I think they win the series. I think Columbus will have just way too much fatigue because of the schedule they had. They played Toronto, 2 games in 2-3 games. I don't recall if they did a back-to-back or not for 4 and 5.
I can't remember. I believe that they did, but then they only had the one day off, and that was a skating day yesterday. That wasn't an actual off day, so they still skated yesterday. They're not fully rested.
Yeah, so I think fatigue will end up catching up with Columbus if they lose this game. If not, it's going to be pure momentum and adrenaline for the rest of it seems like, in my opinion.
If Columbus wins this one, do you think that they're back in Tampa Bay's heads again?
It kind of yes, but it's yeah. I would say that. It's just the fact that would be 5 straight playoff games that you've been, a very top seed in, and with different goaltenders playing. You don't have Bob Brovsky anymore. You got Korpisalo, and he's been fucking phenomenal so far, outside of putting it into his own net by accident. But that wasn't really, I can't really blame it on that. But it's just crazy. I mean, Seth Jones has played 53 minutes. Werenski's played just about 50.
And he just came back from injury.
Yeah, and I thought he was like concussed or something, but apparently he's back. He's fine. But I think, oh man, I don't know what to say. I need to focus on this game first. I never imagined that this first game would go to 4 overtimes.
Yeah, I'm sure that Boston and Carolina didn't think it would either, because they're going to start at like midnight at this point.
Yeah, I'll say this. Whoever wins this game wins the series. Whoever wins Game 1 wins the series. But Tampa Bay, I think they made the right moves getting Goodrow and Coleman. I don't really trust a Zach Bogosian in the playoffs, but this is his first time in a playoff overtime game. But we'll see. Watch. Bogosian will score the game-winning goal. But yeah, I like the moves they made. I just don't think it's enough. And if Tampa Bay does lose this series, I would still stick with John Cooper. I think they have good consistency.
Steve, you there? I think we lost you.
Oh, did we lose him?
No, that's all I had.
Oh.
Okay.
The audio kind of cut off a little bit there. I thought we lost you for a second. Good to know you're still with us. Joe, how do you feel about this series?
I think it's really going to come down to this game, like Steve said. I mean, who in a million years would have thought we would have still been watching a game that started at 3 o'clock at 8:15? So I think whoever wins this game, I do like Steve brought up 2 of the key players. Barclay Goodrow's a guy that's a good player to have for the playoffs. Bogosian, yeah, he's a give or take. So is Coburn, who's a backup. But Cernak's a guy that's young for them, that adds size to their defense. Wasn't really ready last year, but looked a lot better this year and continuing in the play-in for them with a round robin, So that is a guy that I think will continue to help them too. So if Tampa wins this game, I think they are going to win because I think they set up their team to be a little bit more be more tenacious, I guess is a word to use, than they were last year against Columbus.
Yeah, they also got Maroon.
You're right. They also got Patrick Maroon. That's another guy that's a good goal scorer that adds some tenacity too. So, yeah, if they win this first game, I would go with Tampa. But, I mean, if you're coached by Torts and you let him win this type of momentum game, yeah, that's going to be hard to bounce back from.
By the way, we just had a record being broken with Korpisalo recording his 74th save of the game. That is the most all-time in an NHL playoff game. Pretty crazy to see. 74 saves on 76 shots. That's a pretty damn good save percentage there. I think as I was telling you guys before we started recording that if Columbus wins this game, they owe him like a fucking Lamborghini or some shit.
Yeah, you did say that.
Yeah, even Vazzy made like 60 saves. Like either team probably owes their goalie a car.
Pretty much. Pretty much. I'm gonna agree with you, Steve. I think that whoever wins this 4 overtime game, maybe even longer, is going to win the series. But if I had to make a prediction without knowing who wins this game, I'm going to go with Columbus. I think that John Tortorella, as I said, he's one of those guys who always gets that compete level out of his team. They're not nearly as talented, but they, for some reason, always seem to match up well against Tampa. I mean, you don't just go into a playoff series against the number 1 team in the East last year and beat them 4 games in a row if you don't match up well against them. The Tampa is arguably the most talented team in the NHL, and Columbus just disposed of them that easily. I think that there is something to be said for that matchup working in their favor. You guys did mention the fatigue factor with Columbus coming off a tough, hard-fought 5-game qualifier, winning that decisive 5th game against Toronto. But I don't know. I mean, Tampa did not look great in their seeding games. The Flyers disposed of them pretty easily. They did show some fight at the end of the Flyers game. I think they came on a little bit towards the end there, but the Flyers were able to take care of them by a 4-1 final. And I don't know. I don't see Tampa struggling like that in the series, but I think that Columbus is able to ride their momentum from the Toronto series and pick up a win in this series here. I think that this is another one that probably ends up going 6 or 7 games, and the matchup, to me, it favors the Blue Jackets.
Yeah, I was going to say, just as an extra point to this game, imagine being Victor Hedman coming back from a bad leg injury that's like, yeah, I can play game 1, and now you probably play, 55 minutes in game 1?
He's already played.
He's right at 50, yeah.
Right at 50, yeah. I mean, that's pretty, if anyone questions the toughness of hockey players, you should probably never do it again because dude just came back off of a leg injury, and also Patrice Bergeron played with a collapsed lung before. So there's another.
They're approaching 2.5 games worth of hockey here.
Yeah.
They'll be there in about 6 minutes.
Yeah, imagine the other game starts before this game.
Probably will.
Before the next game, before the Bruins and Hurricanes, you have the Vegas game start.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised the way this is going. Anyway, now moving on to the series that we're all worried about. Well, not worried about, but we're all anxiously anticipating. For the first time in 20 years, the Philadelphia Flyers, because they won all 3 games in the round robin, the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, taking on the team that eliminated and upset their in-state rival Penguins. That is the Montreal Canadiens. We'll get to predictions at the end here. But guys, how do you feel about the Flyers, the state of the team going into the series? Is there anybody on this team in particular who stands out, who will be a key to them winning this series? Joe, we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, obviously Scotty's been continuing to uptick his play along with Knack, who's continued to look good. So as you get the depth people to continue to look good, that's what's obviously going to beat Montreal because they got a good top line in both of their lines, depending who they decide to put in it, because sometimes Drouin's on the one side, other times it's Tatar. But the Flyers obviously have much better, and it's not even close, line depth than Montreal. I mean, you got, from when I saw from Jamie, who I work for Flyers Nitty Gritty, he thinks it'll be G. Coots and Jake. So if that's against Tatar, Suzuki, Gallagher, well, who you picking there? I mean, they have a decent first line, but I'm still picking us. Lost Hayes and TK destroyed. Kakaniemi's a good young player, but they destroyed him, Armia, and Drouin's a good player when he's healthy. So but Lautz is great at defense, would D him up. So like we just have a deeper roster, and then on defense, the only defensive line that matches up with us is their first, because you added size by getting Charrot, so they're going to try to bully you a bit. But I think we match up good in the series because you have Provy, Niski against them, they'll be fine. Sanheim, Myers, and Hagen Braun, who are way better than Petrie's good, but then you got Kulak, Quillette, who should be a seventh defenseman, and Victor Mete as your other defenders. So we are a lot deeper there, and I think that's where we're going to take advantage. The other side I think we're going to take advantage is we have a little bit more quickness than Montreal. They got Tatar that they added for their quickness. They got Drouin, and then they got Kakaniemi. Likenen's fast, but he hasn't been showing as much skill as they would have liked yet in his career. So I didn't throw him in that grouping. I think we just outmatched them. The biggest matchup here is goaltending. That's the biggest matchup to look at. Nothing else. It's more goaltending. Carey Price to Carter Hart. After that, I mean, we beat them in most other matchups in my eyes, and I think we will easily win this series. I'll say the prediction of when to the end, but I mean, I think we just outmatched them in this series. They will get a game probably. But
Steve, how do you feel about this one?
Wow. I agree with basically everything Bork said. He definitely put it better than I could ever articulate. But I mean, Suzuki and Kotkaniemi had a fantastic. I'm always going to pronounce names wrong, whether it's on purpose or accidental.
On purpose because of the whiskey.
Usually, like, I purposely say someone's name or, oh, Nathan Gerby's dead. I love that player. All right,
that was
It's 5'6". He's my height on skates.
That's got to be a major penalty. I mean, that was completely away from the play.
Trying to get.
I don't know how a penalty wasn't called there.
Also, he got up.
Completely away from the play.
Yeah, he got up too. So if that doesn't show toughness, if anyone questions toughness of hockey players, then there's another example for you. The dude just walked off and he's 5'6", getting decked by a bigger defenseman.
Sorry, that was a key high confidence of following up Borg here. He just put it so well. But I mean, Suzuki, Kotkaniemi, I'm going to say it wrong again, now on purpose. They really showed some promise against the Penguins. Again, it's a 5-game series. We have more overall depth, specifically on defense, than the Penguins have. So I agree, again, with Bork, the Provorov, Niskanen, Perrin, Sanheim, Myers, and then Braun, and even if it's Ghost or Haig, I think they're better than the Canadiens' defense, and our defense would be able to control and contain the Canadiens' forwards. I don't necessarily recall if you mentioned Petrie for the Canadiens. I think he's their best defenseman. I think Shea Weber's he's not Shea Weber of old, but he's still Shea Weber. And I don't think too highly of Charrot. I just think he's a guy that's kind of bigger. He can defend, but I think it's Petrie and Weber are the two main concerns on defense. Price will steal a game or two, but the Flyers, just overall depth. Aubie Kubel is on fire so far. You mentioned the Hayes line. They're on fire. It's just a matter of Claude Giroux and Sean Couturier finding their grooves of just putting points and goals in. And then I think this is something we win in 5, maybe 6, depending on Carey Price.
Yeah, it's Carey Price is going to be that guy for Montreal. He's going to be their most important player in this series. He basically single-handedly won that series. I mean, they had some guys who played well against Pittsburgh, but I think it was more a matter of him playing well and Matt Murray playing like complete shit. And then Jari played well in the final game, but they just couldn't get anything past Price. So Montreal, they don't have anybody who scares me offensively. If they're going to have any chance in this series, they're going to need to slow it down a little bit and hope that Price can carry them. I think the Flyers are they're too deep. I think we might be talking about the deepest team in the NHL being the Flyers. Offensively, all 4 lines can beat you. Defensively, all 3 defensive lines, they're solid from top to bottom. This is the best Flyers team that I don't know. It might be the best Flyers team that I've ever seen in my life. And, we saw the one that got on that run and went to the Cup in 2010. We saw some great teams in the early 2000s, going to the conference finals a few times, and the Legion of Doom days going back to that. That's as long as I've been a fan. This is probably the best team that I've seen in my lifetime for the Flyers, and they have so many guys that can beat you when it's not the top line. The top line didn't do anything in terms of scoring in the seeding games. It was all the bottom three lines that took care of that, and they did an excellent job. They, Knack with a 2-goal game. Kevin Hayes played great. Scott Lawton played great. If those guys are clicking on all cylinders like they were in the seeding round, then I don't see the Flyers coming anywhere close to losing a series here. But for me, my biggest thing that I'm looking for in this series is how well Carter Hart plays. Technically, he got his first taste of playoff action in those 2 games that he played leading into the series, but this is his first test of true, playoff series action, and it'll be really interesting to see how he reacts to it. Brian Elliott has his experience. We all remember that game where Dave Haxtell let him hang out to dry against Pittsburgh. But he's been there. He's done that. He's been around the block a few times in the playoffs. The kid never been in a playoff series situation before. So I'm really interested to see how he reacts to it, how he handles the pressure of being in the playoffs. And, I'm excited. I think that he's going to do well. All right, so I'm sorry. Go ahead, Borg.
No, I was going to say, like the song says, we came, we soared, and conquered. That's what Carter Hart's going to do.
I like it. So do you guys, I know you talked a little bit about it, and Steve, I'll start with you. Do you guys have anybody in particular, maybe aside from Carey Price? I think Carey Price will be the consensus here, but in terms of the skaters for Montreal, do you have any skaters in particular who could potentially give the Flyers a scare and who we should maybe be worried about in this series?
It's kind of tough. Between that first line, Suzuki played really well against the Penguins, but Brendan Gallagher, he's just relentless.
He's a pest.
He's relentless.
I think he's a playoff style of player, kind of.
Yeah.
It's always those pesky kind of players who sometimes give the Flyers problems.
Yeah, so I would probably say Gallagher, mainly feeding off of Suzuki, but it's just a matter of, the Flyers keeping their cool, while Gallagher's on the ice, TK chirping them, that'll be fine. But yeah.
They better have that mic'd up.
Probably say Gallagher. Close second, I would say, was probably Petrie. I just think he's a very solid defenseman. He's really, really found his game in Montreal.
Yeah, two good choices there. I could certainly see both of them having an impact in the series. Joe, how do you feel about this? Any guy in particular for you?
Yeah, Jeff Petrie's always been underrated. I agree with Steve on that entirely. And Drew Ann looked good in the qualifying. So he's a guy, when he's healthy, normally he starts to get in a groove. The problem is then he gets injured. He's kind of like the Roman Quinn of the Canadians. So if he's able to stay healthy and do well, then he'll be fine. And that's somebody you probably have to look out for. And then the other would just be Shea Weber, who dominated the first series. You don't want to keep having him. The Penguins made Shea Weber look like Steve said, doesn't normally look like the normal Shea Weber anymore. Well, against Pittsburgh, he made put on a good disguise. So
he's not prime years Nashville Shea Weber.
Yeah, he looked like Nashville Shea Weber, just like Keith looked like prime years Duncan Keith against Edmonton. But I believe that we're going to be able to get it done because Shea Weber, what he still has in the skill that he showed in the first round, he does not have speed. And we have much quicker guys, but those are just guys I would look to because he can still bully you. And Drew Ann's a dynamic player in all facets of the game when he's actually going strong, and it looks like he's fully healthy now. So that's the biggest guy to look out for skill-wise, where the guy that Steve said in Gallagher's the pesky guy, like you said, Rob, that normally pisses off and sometimes gets a goal or two against the Flyers.
Yeah, certainly some very good names to be mentioned there. I'm actually going to go in a different direction. I'm going to go with Kokoniemi, just because the talent alone, it's untapped potential still with him, but he just they have such high hopes for him, and I think that eventually he is going to come through on that. He is going to be that guy, an offensive force for the Montreal Canadiens, and there's potential that this series could be kind of a coming out party for him. I don't think it'll make a difference in terms of who wins the series, but he's certainly a guy who the Flyers will definitely need to pay attention to because, like I said, that talent alone offensively is he could be a difference maker at some point. So he's my guy who the Philadelphia Flyers and the fans should be watching out for in terms of the Montreal skaters as far as they go in this series.
I can agree with that because they'll probably be facing the Grant line. So as long as Grant and whoever's wingers are, AV's not going to release anything, but it does have potential to maybe overtake a shift or two.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. I don't see it being a huge difference maker in the series, quite frankly. Knock on wood. I'm knocking on wood right now. I do think it'll be a fairly easy series for the Flyers, but that's a matchup that could potentially give them some problems. All right, so
that kid's going to be something special, and obviously I always love when people believe in prospects. So good on you, Rob. But he's only 20 and he's going to be really good. So yeah, that's a good pick by you there. Good pool, as Shane would say.
Yeah, Steve, you might have to start getting his name right by the end. You might not have an excuse to continue getting his name wrong after the series.
Nah, if I'm stuck with the pronunciation, I have to stick with it.
Fair enough.
Got to stay on brand.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on to our final predictions. I think we've all three of us have made it clear who we think is going to win this series. But Steve, I'll start with you. How many games does it take the Flyers to win this series?
I want to say 5. I do think Price steals a game. There's potential for 6, but I really do think it's going to be Flyers in 5.
Flyers in 5. All right, Joe, what about you?
Same thing because of what Steve said. Price is probably going to steal one game from us, but the Flyers are getting in 5 because of what we said already.
Yeah, I really want to say Flyers in 4, but I feel like there's kind of an unwritten rule that you can never predict a sweep. So I'm going to go with you guys. I'm going to say Flyers in 5. I just think top to bottom talent level. I think at this point in their careers, Carter Hart's a better goaltender than Carey Price. Although, as we said, Price played really well against the Penguins. The Flyers are they're too good. I think they're going to overpower the Canadiens. As I said, I would go 4 games, but it's kind of an unwritten rule. You got to give Montreal at least one, so I'm going to say Flyers in 5.
Yeah, I mean, the only drawback is there's 2 potentials for the Flyers losing the series. 1, it's Carey Price, and 2, it's the Flyers' fucking history of blowing it. So, to be fair there, I just had to get that out there. If they lose,
they do have the history of blowing it.
I will be sad until this next season starts, whenever it is, December.
Yeah. Well, we didn't have a veteran coaching staff when we blew it with those others, so that should be helpful.
But hey, AV lost to Claude Julien in the Stanley Cup Finals, so that's another concern there, another factor.
But also, the Flyers have history on their side because what happened last time Montreal beat Pittsburgh in a playoff series and then went on to face the Flyers in the next round?
This is true, but Yaroslav Halak was starting. Carey Price.
It is true, but the Flyers just absolutely blew them out of the water in that series.
Yes. Hopefully we'll have another shift by one of our players this year.
That's one of my favorite plays of ever in the playoffs when I've watched the Flyers, when Richie just chipped that past Halak and he had a wide open net and made him look like an idiot when he came all the way out of the net to try to play that puck. Remember that?
The best part about that play, since it's been brought up, is Braden Coburn being physical.
Yeah. The only time
go back
in his
and
entire career.
Watch that clip, and you'll see, Richards doing Richards things, and then it goes back, and Braden Coburn just absolutely fucking rocks someone, and it just leads to the play going to the Richards goal.
You know what? No, there was one other time where Braden Coburn showed some physicality. I remember it clearly because it was against Buffalo in a regular season game. That scumbag Patrick Coletta had Kimmo Timonen lined up for what definitely would have been a 5-minute major for boarding, and he probably would have ended Timonen's life or something like that. And Coburn just comes out of nowhere and just drills Coletta right before he could hit Timonen. Coletta actually, I think he suffered like a broken collarbone or something like that. And it was the one time that I just absolutely loved something that Braden Coburn did.
Yeah,
Coburn Timonen was one of my favorite defensive pairings we've had in the past 15 years, probably.
But yeah, I'm just.
All I would have to say to a player like Coletta is karma's a bitch. It's like Sean Avery. Whenever anything happens to you, karma's a bitch.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like Corey Perry and Matthew Tkachuk fighting each other. Great. These two assholes can be beating each other up.
All right, well, we're trying to watch this hockey game here. We're moving towards potentially a fifth overtime. So do you guys have any final thoughts before we wrap this one up here?
Mine just is, when I met Richie, I had the We Want the Cup in Philadelphia shirt. Didn't get it yet, so, still want that cup in Philly. I think we have the best team, the deepest team to do it this year, so we're going to beat the Montreal and then continue to get to that Stanley Cup because I think we are the team that is going to get to the finals, so let's keep moving on, baby.
Love it. Steve, what about you?
As long as everything keeps working out as it seems to be, we're basically top 3 team in 2020 alone. So as long as we keep it up and good signs in the round robin, I believe there's a legitimate shot there besides, just Philly being Philly. So hopefully we overcome that with AV and Carter Hart and, Couturier, Provorov. We have the depth. We have the team. If Lindblom does come back in September, I feel like that just increases our chances even more. Not because of how good he is, but just the whole story.
Yeah, I was going to say, I just want to throw that in there real quick. If Lindblom does come back and he's able to play, in September, which would probably be the conference finals and then the Stanley Cup, I feel like there's some sort of a written in the stars aspect there. Maybe, everything's aligning in the Flyers' favor, kind of like it did for the Eagles back in 2017. Could be, some sort of a Hollywood script where a guy beats cancer and then comes back and wins the Stanley Cup. One can hope, right?
Yep.
Anyway, I just want to give a shout out real quick. First off to the band that is responsible for our intro and outro music. If you're looking for music that's going to get you pumped up for these Flyers playoff games, Celtic rock is a great way to go. And the Jackdaws are as good a Celtic rock band as you'll find. As I said, they're responsible for our intro and outro music. They have a lot of great music out there. Wherever you listen to music, you can find them. Lots of great stuff. You can find them on the internet at www.thejackdolls.com. They also have a Patreon account at www.patreon.com/thejackdolls. Local band. Definitely, as with a lot of bands during this tough time, they're struggling because they can't do live performances, which is their number one source of income. So if you're interested, please go out and give them your support. They definitely do deserve it. And if you're looking for food to eat as you're watching the Flyers kick some ass in the playoffs, look no further than Just Food. You can find them located in Buckingham Green in Buckingham, Pennsylvania. You can find them on the phone at 215-794-3663. That is 215-794-FOOD. Their owner, Asian Rob, a great guy, great friend of the Always Next to Your podcast network. They have such an incredible selection of food there. Once again, Just Food, located in Buckingham, Pennsylvania, in Buckingham Green. And you can find them on the phone at 215-794-3663. We thank you for listening to this inaugural playoff edition of the Disciples of Ed podcast, and we'll be back with another one shortly.
Man, I used to be revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son, still have me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.